and as long as it's lined up, like we know that we're gonna have lag because of the phone, but it will translate into the recording.
Exactly.
So
I think that's how
it
the
all
science
smooths
works.
out.
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
All right. Well, welcome back to the podcast, everybody.
Hell yeah.
Today is March 10th, 2019, the year of our Lord.
Yeah.
We're excited to bring you a podcast.
Oh, exactly. It's been a while, and we apologize for that, but while the government has been technically functioning...
One of these days we'll stop apologizing for not recording
every
week.
Pretty much. Yeah. You know, we had such a good setup, and then this semester was not
Hey, we've been
when
busy.
You're
We've been busy.
We have, but anyways, we have a lot of news to cover, obviously.
Oh, yeah, we do.
We have a lot that we probably would have done whole podcasts on, but at this point, it's been talked about it enough, and hopefully your other podcasts have informed you enough upon.
Yeah. So we're going to try to brush up on some of the state and local. Of course, we have some of the big headlines to get from the national stage, but...
Yeah, and we have a bit of international news to get to. I think we'll do it next week, or this week. Oh, we have time.
Thanks for tuning in this week, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to cover, and we're going to breeze through all of it,
So as the weather warms up, and the birds start chirping, and the flowers start blooming, you may pop in your headphones and take a drive down Conversation Street with Brett and Adam. Anyways, time to go.
Oh, let's get into it.
Alright, so the first topic that we're going to cover today happened about 2 weeks ago now, I believe. Michael Cohen testified in front of Congress, and I'm sure all of you have heard about this and know, and Brett and I aren't going to go very much into this, but it was long, it was well worth watching, well worth wasting time watching, and very revealing, and the man is going to jail. Brett, what are your takeaways? Yeah,
I think all the hot takes that'll be taken have been took. My biggest thing in watching this is just, don't get me wrong, I got that sick sense of satisfaction of like, wow, someone's finally being brought to justice over this. And we, not only that, get to watch them squirm on live television. And again, that's just one of those like animal instincts, just depraved, craven senses of satisfaction that you know is wrong, but you engage in it anyway. That being said, there was a point where my stomach kind of dropped out 15 minutes in because I realized, wow, our democracy is crumbling around us. But I think more than anything, what that hearing showed us was a great forewarning of what we're going to see as, the Mueller report was supposed to come out, but we don't have a week now when the Mueller report wasn't supposed to come out. So we're still waiting on that. But if and when the other shoe drops, this is what we can expect. We can expect a Republican Party that's going to completely refuse to acknowledge facts, that is going to try to redivert attention anywhere else. I mean, we're not going to have the Nixon Watergate moment of where the head of the Republican Party is going to come out and say, okay, now this is over the line. Like, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, probably not. But I think that the biggest takeaway that I got, and the part that I was most satisfied with, was when it was near the end, when Cohen started talking about how he was like, look, I have lied and done horrible things for this man, complicitly, without even questioning it, without knowing why I was doing these things. And he basically looks at the Republicans in the room, who are all in the same fucking boat, for having covered up, for this president's lies and illegal crimes, not even knowing what the hell they are.
Yeah.
And they have wholeheartedly jumped on that boat. And it was great to see him issue this kind of backhanded warning to all of them in the way that this was, something that he is going to jail for now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he who wants to be that bellwether, but I mean, we also have to face reality and acknowledge that, like, there will be very little repercussion for most of these members of Congress who have kind of blindly followed him. But good cautionary tale nonetheless of, hey, this is a man who regularly hires and employs criminals.
Yeah.
Like, his best sense of judgment in employees is hiring criminals.
And I think the thing that really is, that we all knew, but it's nice to have this kind of continued contrast, is the fact that Michael Cohen indicted the president in multiple felonies.
Indicated.
Well, he has receipts, quite literally.
Yeah, but he didn't indict the president.
No, he didn't indict the president, but what he did was provide evidence that would indict a president of.
Well, he confirmed if it was individual one was the president or whatever the
we all knew that, but like he came with proof that yes, the president knew and we intended doing these things that were violations of campaign finance, but it also revealed a lot of other crimes, such as negotiating deals in Russia about the Trump Tower in Russia in Moscow. I think it was the biggest reveal of individual crimes and that kind of thing that came out due to this. Not that came out, but more of were substantially confirmed by Michael Cohen. So
yeah, and I think this will be one of those interesting moments in history we'll look back on, and whatever we end up getting him for, whether he's arrested or impeached or hopefully both, I think this will be one of those pivotal moments that we look back and say, okay, where did we fuck up, or what did we get right based off of what we're learning from this experience? And again, it makes for good television, which is the worst part, in my opinion, is Jesus Christ, do we have to be entertained by politics? Can't we go back to politics being boring? The answer's probably no.
And then, oh my god, and then we had this, the
oh my god,
Trump
it wasn't,
employee,
it was just all around, Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows. It was just bad judgment all around by these people. I mean, first of all, none of them asked an actual question of Michael Cohen. They just yelled at him for being a liar, to which he was like, yes, and I'm going to jail for lying. Like,
yeah, exactly. And they're like, oh, how can we trust you if you're a liar? And he's like, well, I'm going to jail now.
Well, and there was someone
it was like, I have no reason to protect anyone.
Right.
Now.
And there was someone who brought up the great point of, like, all someone had to do, because the Republicans kept coming back to the fact that Michael Cohen was a liar. All someone had to do was ask the question, okay, they're convinced that you were a liar. What were you lying about? And it's everything that had to do with Trump and the election. So, like, they were one step away from the Republicans having to eat their own shoes in the sense of, like, yes, this is a man who we are acknowledging is a liar, but what his lie was to help get the president elected. So, like, Jesus Christ, it's frustrating.
Oh, yeah. It is. Another big headlines that we're not going to talk too much upon. Trump and the Supreme Leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, had a wonderfully splendid and a very, very productive meeting in Vietnam. First time Donald Trump has ever been there because of shin splints.
Visit to the country. Bone spurs, sirs. Bone spurs.
Bone spurs. That's
lest
what it
we
is.
Not confuse the two.
Anyways, no, but they had a meeting, another summit that was somehow less productive than the first. Ended with neither of them reaching any form of deal. It was a giant waste of time because when you send a orange orangutan to meet with the leader, it's not that we know a heck of a lot about Kim Jong-un, but you basically to send him to meet with one of probably the worst people on this planet as far as political world leaders go. He's up there of the living ones at this point.
We sent our worst person to talk with their worst person, and
well, with no supporting staff.
Yeah,
and
And what did we learn? Like yesterday, that the DPRK is potentially rebuilding one of its missile sites.
Oh, some of the sites that basically they couldn't agree on what
on it. They never agreed to it in the first place.
Of non-proliferation, so it's a time. But we'll touch on nuclear proliferation a little later, not including the DPRK. So
let's proliferate.
Anyways, it was useless. It was a waste of time. And we have more important things to focus upon.
Yeah.
It's like basically for the last 4 presidencies, we've been trying to get this problem solved, and we've had way more confident people try and fail. And so this was expected.
Well, we just file this under the list of damage that Trump is doing to this country. I mean, the North Korea has been trying for a generation now to get a summit with a first world leader, and they've been rejected because, of course, giving them that seat on the national stage or an international stage gives them legitimacy, and by depriving them of that, making that a leverage point in negotiations, we've just given it to them. And so now they'll have no incentive to say, hey, because they'll be like, hey, the last guy did it. Obviously we're legitimate now. Again, another point of frustration. I mean, we see this Cold War satellite state function still being fought out today. I mean, Russia and China, these communist states, are still backing North Korea, and vice versa. We're still backing South Korea and all this other stuff. And I mean, we never really even got. We still are technically fighting the Korean War because we never actually got that treaty.
Ended it.
We're still just at a ceasefire. But it's so frustrating. And these are the things. We can talk about the Cohen hearings, and we can talk about how the president undertook all of these different crimes to win the presidency. But the fact of the matter is, whoever comes next, regardless of how we get him out of office, is going to have to deal with these issues. And these are big, complicated issues. And so,
one of the things that really pisses me off is the fact that you have certain Republicans some non what is it, the never Trumpers even that will say that like one of the biggest mistakes of the left is the fact that they don't acknowledge any of the good things that this president has done, and a lot of them will point to North Korea as an accomplishment. And I'm like, what that dialogue did was nothing of substance, and but the only substance that those talks brought around is the United States not conducting military exercises with the South Korean army near the border of North Korea.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the only thing that did. And what that does is it's more of a symbolic thing, but it basically shows more favoritism towards the North Koreans, which we have been at war at, as you said, since the 1950s, from one of our closest allies in the region, South Korea.
Literally couldn't be any closer in the region or our ally. The same peninsula.
It's so stupid.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. And of course, they get nothing done, and we're back to square one. And what we did was we terrified everyone for like a couple weeks with the whole fire and fury shit. You get down to like vacuous claims of like non-proliferation, and then now we're here with all of that done. We're probably not going to have another fucking summit, though. I don't even know. But regardless, nothing's going to happen, and all that's done is the fact that we now know that anytime Kim Jong-un travels by car, that a bunch of well-dressed North Korean bodyguards run alongside it.
Well, I think there are two useful things we can take away from this. I think one, the most obvious, is okay, now we have to accept the fact, and we have to all acknowledge collectively, the Republican Party is no longer the party that hates communism. I mean, for the longest time, that was their line in the sand on international policy, was that we don't like dictators, we really love democracy, and everywhere that doesn't have democracy is our enemy. We can no longer accept that because it's obviously just blatantly not true. And two, this should be kind of a measuring stick for all of our candidates in 2020 in terms of international relations, international policy, is how would they, as president, address these complex problems that they're inheriting. And again, I think this will be a good way to weed people out in the debates and things like that. So it's a lot of really good information to keep in mind as we start the primary here pretty soon, whenever Tom Steyer decides to get it started. 2016 is when it got started.
So anyways, moving on. I think there's one other thing that we'll touch on. I mean, this is more national news here, but it's still involves our good old commander-in-chief. CPAC happened, which is, it's a time. It's basically, what this is it's a conservative...
It's the Conservative Political Action Committee.
Yes, which it basically is a conference that's set up by the wife of the communications director of the Trump administration. Our president talked for 2.5 hours. Yeah. And ranted about literally everything under the sun, which was insane.
Yeah,
it was insane. And who else? Basically, it's a shit show, and it's a massive distraction, and we shouldn't care anymore, and they shouldn't broadcast it on C-SPAN.
I mean, I think CPAC and that speech specifically showed us this is a guy who's going to employ this tactic in the general in 2020. Is what he did was he had a speech on the teleprompter. He would read a line, and then he would just start monologuing. He just started going. People ate it up. It was a stand-up routine. I mean, lest we not forget the roast of Donald Trump. He's still playing that out in his head all these years later. That was literally back in like 2009. It was a decade ago.
Yep.
And that's how we're gonna get beat, is because he is the more entertaining candidate to watch, and because he does shit like that. Unfortunately, the politics of the olden days are gone, where we have respectable people get up on stage and debate policy and things that matter. We need someone now who makes for good television, and preferably has a mind for policy. But I will take the candidate that makes good television.
Anyways, that's all I have to say about CPAC.
Yeah, I don't think there's much else to be said, to be honest. Go watch the speech if you want 2 hours of giggles.
Watch the highlights, because I don't think it's worth that.
Mm-hmm.
It's
fair
awful.
Enough. Yeah.
It's so awful.
So this week was a big week for state and local politics, as every week has been. But specifically, there's been a lot of nonsense going on in Kansas, and then Adam's going to get us caught up on what's happening in Missouri. Real quick, this week for Kansas, I just have some fun headlines I want to go through, if that's all right with you, Adam.
Have at it, Brett.
Representative Adam Thomas, who's a Republican from Olathe, was excused early last week to attend his court date for, of all things, election perjury. Turns out he doesn't actually live in Olathe, the place where, you have to live to run for. He counterfeited those documents, was found out, and guess what? Was still elected and is still serving member of the House of Representatives. His court date is set for May. He's most likely going to motion for a delay until session's over and all this kind of stuff. Probably nothing will happen with that, but Jesus Christ, how on brand that he won his seat through election perjury. You know, we're this late into the session. The Kansas State House just passed its first bill, Senate Bill 9, which adds $115 million to the pension system. This is a 2016 era payment that was skipped over and was subsequently been skipped over all of the pension payments from the state because Brownback's tax experiment cost the state too much money to where to keep the budget balanced or even a semblance of balance, we weren't paying into the state employee pension. The kicker of that is the Republicans are also pushing through, when I mean pushing, I mean changing the rules to push through a $230 million some odd dollar tax cut for the state of Kansas. Because we didn't have enough money to pay the pension systems, but now that we do, we're going to pass $200 some odd million in tax cuts. There is a small percentage of that goes to cutting the sales and food tax, but 2/3 of it goes to, you guessed it, multinational corporations. My frustration with the Republican Party seemingly has no limits to it. This stupid Reagan-era doctrine of, hey, the best way to attract corporations is to make your state a corporate safe haven by having no taxes for businesses hasn't worked. So these are the things that I've been really lamenting, ranting, and raving about this week because, it's really easy. It's really fun for liberals to bash on Republicans or to bash on conservatives because, obviously they're all racist, misogynist, blah, 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 whatever. But, when you really get to the heart of it, these are people who are elected, and even no matter what your philosophy on government is, I think we can all agree, conservatives and liberals alike, that the purpose of government is to help people. It's not to fuck people over, but to help people. And here the conservatives, the Republican Party especially, has been given ample opportunity in the face of the most unpopular governor, the most unpopular tax plan, to do some good for the state and to bring in some money. And what they do is they end up just feeding back to their donors who are the owners of these multinational corporations who have no interest in investing in Kansas. But so long as they can make sure that they're not having to pay their state income tax at the end of the year, they're going to keep helping these people get reelected. It's the most cynical take on politics in general. But it's just the reality that we're living in. And it's difficult to talk about it without being dubbed as a crazy liberal or someone who's just looking at this very narrowly. But I mean, it doesn't take much to see that these policies aren't helping people. And they're not intended to either. But they have a better messaging and propaganda system than we do, so we're going to lose the fight every single time. And that's a majority of what I've been pissed off about this week.
Yeah, no, that's fair. All right, well, yeah, damn. I have nothing to add there. You covered all the bases.
Talk to me about Missouri. Talk to me about what's going on here, because I'm sure there are a lot of similarities between the two.
That's the thing. The whole time I'm like, oh damn, that's the show me state is following the lead here. It's there is definitely a whole national movement in this regard. Basically, what's going on in Missouri at the moment is. Recently in the Senate, we've been fighting over joinder and venue, which is a special legal term for basically a way of gutting class action lawsuit cases, how court cases are tried, and where they are tried in the state of Missouri. How this whole thing goes down is that what it does is it really guts one of the foundational pillars of the Democratic Party of Missouri, which is, people affected by mesothelioma, people that have been unfairly treated by employers, state agencies, all of this stuff, because all of those lawsuits that they would bring against the state would be done through there. Basically, and it was a whole mess of things, and what it would truly do would significantly increase the amount of court cases, because it would disperse everyone that was trying to file for claims with one court case. It would force them all to file those claims in the counties by which they reside in, and it was a whole mess of things. Other things that they are significantly pushing, vouchers and charters. Charter schools are coming up big time. Basically, what Missouri's trying to do is expand. Charter schools can be started in any city or county, or no, city with more than 30,000 people in it. But municipalities and how that will affect St. Louis County is still highly questionable. And then the voucher program will also be brought up at some point. And what that does is it basically defunds public schools. Love that. Both of these kind of work to do that. And what they do is they're basically just set up for-profit schools in areas that would take away from high-functioning and well-functioning public schools and usually higher economically prosperous areas. So it would set up competition for schools in like places like Ladue, which is, to my understanding, is a very nice part of St. Louis. So, but it's just it is a way of basically funding private religious institutions and private schools. So anyways, that's on the docket. Other things that are coming up, the biggest thing is that all of the Governor Parsons, and we talked about this in one of our first podcasts this season, about the fast-track bills and workforce development and that kind of thing. All of that stuff has been heavily attacked and basically put off by the Conservative caucus, which we talked about in that first episode, I do believe. And it's been very interesting watching these things play out, and how nothing in the Senate is ever truly upon partisan lines. Well, most things in the Senate, and this is one of them.
If you redefine those partisan lines to include moderates, liberals, conservatives, and uber conservatives.
Yeah. Then they are, but things sometimes do not play out that way, and it's certainly interesting to see how that has been going along these bills. Because as far as education goes, there's a handful of Republican senators that hate charter schools, and there's another handful that hate vouchers. I think all the Democrats are against those, but it's because we're good people. So it's been interesting. Another thing to touch on, last week we had a filibuster the day after we had our 16-long-hour filibuster, in which Senator Dave Sater from Berry County has proposed. He has quite a lot of legislation, but two of his biggest bills this year. One of them, basically, if you are a Medicaid recipient, and not working, it basically kicks you off of Medicaid. And there's a bunch of exceptions to this, but the biggest thing is how the filing for it will go, because it's most likely to be heavily underfunded, unreliable, and kick people that should qualify for Medicaid off of Medicaid. And it's just vile, which is the words of Senator Nasheed. She straight up. So anyways, we heard this bill in the Senate, and she filibustered for like 4 hours alone, and straight up called him vile to his face, and it made me very happy.
Yeah, but again, it just illustrates this. Let's cut. I mean, they can't just straight up abolish the program, but they can make it to where nobody would qualify for it.
That's another thing, though, is also he has a bill that says if you're not working or volunteering, you also will lose SNAP benefits, because, of course, why should we not help people that are economically struggling?
Because they'll have no incentive to go get a job, those lazy fucks.
And you're like, yeah.
Don't you know?
And this is ridiculous, because then also it's brought up the fact that, like, this is a great point, as Nasheed was like, oh, what about for people that have been convicted of a felony? I'm like, because usually businesses will not hire people who have felony convictions. And Senator Sater gets up and says, one of the people that I know on my way to work every day that I pass, he hires a bunch of felons for his business. And she's like, great antidote, show me the rest. She's like, show me the fucking stats.
It's literally I can't be a racist, I know a black person. It's the same line of thinking.
This is something that, and I find this ridiculously prevalent with even peers of ours that identify as conservatives, is the fact that, like, if a statistic and a political trend across the state or the country, state, whatever, if it does exist and they have some kind of personal anecdote that goes against this, they will wholeheartedly.
They also have an antidote against it, I'll be honest, but yeah.
Well, it's just they have something that says, like, a personal testimony that basically provides one instance of something going otherwise from this, and they will use that as foundation for making an entire argument against protecting someone or doing something like this.
Again, it's obviously this isn't true. Here's one exception.
Yeah, I'm looking at
Donald Trump's not a racist. He had a black person on his staff. The same fucking thing. It's gross. It's just disgusting.
What else is there? So Missouri passed Clean Missouri, which is a ballot initiative that did a lot of things that I feel very strongly and in favor of 90% of them. But we'll get into that later. One of the things that it does is it draws competitive and basically politically motivated electoral districts at the state level, and it would turn it over from being a congressionally elected board that does this, which basically means whoever's in power gets to appoint these people and draw a gerrymandered Senate district. What this bill would do, or what this act, which has been enacted and which will be used in the next time they draw congressional districts, as long as it's not changed at all, basically would look at these things and revert those kinds of gerrymandering and make it more of an independent process where the current representatives and senators do not have the kind of influence to draw terribly politically favorable. It would still what it draws is competitive districts and not gerrymandered ones.
Yeah.
And so it'll be very interesting because there's a couple senatorial districts at the Missouri state level that are always highly competitive. So, anyways, that's all I got from Missouri.
Yeah.
What's been going on at the India-Pakistan border over the region known as Kashmir, which is split in half between this whole region, which has been contested for years and was basically this has been an issue is ongoing since the time that the partition of India happened back in 1946.
Yep.
This has been a major point of contention between these two countries. Over the past 2 weeks, there has been a major uptick in conflict between India and Pakistan. And both of these countries, India is the second largest populated country in the world. It has the third largest economy, ranging in that regard. Its sync score, which is basically a nation's power, I think is listed as number 4, maybe. It's a powerful country with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Up against Pakistan, which again has been at war for
since its foundation,
basically for a long time. It is a very well-versed military in this regard. While it and the United States have been allies, it's very tentative. We have much closer relations with India, especially since the end of the fall of the Cold War, the end of the Soviet Union, because India was socialist for a long time and somewhat allied with them. But anyways, what this all boils down to is the fact that it is very dangerous when you have two countries that illegally have nuclear weapons shooting down each other's fighter pilots, planes, taking each other's fighter pilots hostage, and sending troops to one of the most contested and conflict-prone areas of the world.
Yeah.
India and Pakistan have fought numerous wars over this territory since the 1950s. It has caused a proliferation of conflict moving over into Bangladesh, Thailand,
Sri Lanka,
Nepal. Tibet also helped with some of this has been a very dangerous place and a very tenuous situation.
Almost like when you arbitrarily subdivide ethnic groups, it kind of creates problems. I don't know. Yep. Seems like a foreign concept to me.
And of course, there is also an ethnic minority of the Punjab, which is the region where where a large this Muslim community within India, which has been persecuted for a long time by this Hindu majority, has been located, which is basically the fault line for all of this.
Yeah.
But anyways, the whole thing to get at this is the fact that if this conflict continues and does eventually boil over into some kind of war, this will most likely be the next fault line for a world war if it does decide to occur. Rather than Russia invading a Balkan state, what this does, which very well could happen, but they're
already
all protected
happened.
under
We
NATO.
didn't care.
No, Ukraine is not a Balkan state.
In terms of Russia invading a place that was supposed to be our friend.
Well, it was almost our friend.
They could take over Oslo
invaded.
for all I fucking care. It's not like we're gonna get involved.
I think that's the thing. The biggest difference is the fact that they're not in NATO, and if they did invade a
like
NATO
we want to be in NATO right now.
You know, wars last longer than Donald Trump's presidency. So some of them.
I mean,
could.
When we're faced with nuclear annihilation, war's not gonna last that long.
No,
that's the kickers. India and Pakistan are both nuclear powers.
Yes, they are, and they are illegally so. India violated the Non-Proliferation Treaty before Pakistan did develop nuclear weapons. Pakistan eventually got there in the 80s. Also, can we just thanks to South Africa and Israel. South Africa for, I believe, helping out Pakistan, and Israel for funding the Indias and providing them with nuclear knowledge. Because Israel also illegally has South Africa helped Israel, which then in turn helped India. So it's been a whole mess.
What a menage a trois, truly.
Right? Anyways, basically, this is a point of contention that I don't think is covered nearly enough because of how dangerous this is. Because you realize Pakistan is not super allied with China. China and India do not get along at all because they are two rising economic superpowers within the same region fighting over the same kind of markets. While, yes, China does have massive amounts of more resources than India, and much more developed political authoritarian regime that helps them actually achieve these goals. India has been much quicker on that track as of recent, which is it threatened China. They share a large border, especially when you consider that states like Nepal and Bhutan will be squeezed in between these things. So basically, this is the powder keg of the Middle Asia.
Of the Eurasian Peninsula.
Yeah, basically. And it's definitely something that we should definitely be able to be a resource, because, the party that will step in to negotiate this, it's probably not going to be the only party besides the United States that has any kind of authority to kind of move these individuals into line through the United Nations would be China, because that's how the United States would do it. But of course, with our consistent attacks, we've opened the door for our largest international competitor to have its way with the rest of the world.
Well, lest we not forget, Russia is most undoubtedly involved in this in some capacity.
Well, there's probably a good chance of that. Even though I don't know how, I have no idea how relations are between Pakistan and Russia.
Probably okay, if I were to assume.
Probably okay. Yeah. I don't think Pakistan and Afghanistan get along well, so we all know the history between Russia and Afghanistan, with the whole war.
Yeah.
So it's definitely questionable, but Pakistan has been a weird ally to the United States for a long time now, and has been an ally that has basically played both sides consistently, and we have been all right with that.
Yeah.
For a long time now. So it's and I think Trump and Pakistan have recently, I did a project on this like a year ago or so, they have not gotten along well at all.
Weird.
And Trump has attacked Pakistan consistently for the amount of military funding and help and aid we give them.
It's a shithole country, don't you know?
Yeah, well, it's been threatened to be taken away and all this. It's been a whole time. Yeah. So relations are never good. Modi, the Prime Minister of India, who has been this kind of Trumpian strongman populist figure, just filed for re-election. So there'll be there's the election in India will occur I'd probably in the next couple set of months, but he'll most likely be re-elected again, I believe. But he's been very protectionist and realist in his regards to international politics, so it'll be certainly interesting to see how things play out in this region.
Keep an eye on the news,
that happens
folks.
There will affect us. So I think that's all we got this week. Next week, look forward to Brexit. I promise.
Because either it's happening or it's not.
And how that goes down will be discussed.
Yeah. So a lot of things to keep in mind. Hope this wasn't too depressing.
Yeah.
Just remember, things could always be worse.
This is true. This is true. The 36% was founded, written, and directed by Adam Childers Arnold and Brett Combs.
Music in this episode is provided by Purple Planet. You can check them out at purple-planet.com.
The presenting sponsor of the 36% is Avian Apparel.
Our audio engineering is done by Bird Crumbs.
Our ukulele muse, as always, is Adam California.
Research and outlining for this episode was performed by Ben Sherman.
And scheduling was done by Yorkie March to the Sea Sherman.
Our cover art, as always, was provided by the wonderful Christian Ferguson.
And special thanks to, again, all of our listeners for sticking us out for our very inconsistently timed podcasts and for still not giving up on democracy.
No.
So.
Thank you so much. Well, as for always, thank you so much for listening. I'm Brett Combs.
And I'm Adam.
And this has been the 36%.